Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. This is episode 2 of our drawer making series. And I'm just finishing off the second. Now, I got a little area with some tear right there I'm going to deal with, but I want to show you this first. We shot a video last night on our online workshop, and we showed some of the projects we've done. And this is a mobile tool cabinet that we made in the hand tool workshop. And I apologize if you've already seen this, but for those of you who haven't. So this was made entirely with hand tools. And the idea came from our members saying, you know, I have to share the garage with my wife's car, so everything has to go away when I'm done. And personally, I travel a lot and teach. I like to be able to take my tools with me. But I also know how roughly they get handled when you're shipping. So this whole thing goes together. In fact, I'm going to take just a minute and put it back together so you can see it, and you can kind of envision the way it goes. But before I do that, I'll just show you some of the features. Had to make everything really compact. So because of that, when we started this, we started off with a scale model. I literally made a scale model. I liked the proportions, changed what I didn't like. From there, we made a full-size mock-up just out of inexpensive plywood. And we did that because you had to be able to see, am I going to get all these parts and pieces in? And we had to figure this whole section out. You'll see what I mean momentarily. So one of the things we have here for our saws, if you left your saws in something like that, then you couldn't utilize anything up here because it would be in the way. So the saw tilts out. And you can have, I carry my 3 with me. I don't know where my dovetail saw's gone. Oh, I did. Somebody bought it from me at the last show. I got to make a new one. So dovetail, bench, joinery crosscut, medium tenon. And then here's my gauges. Here's my panel gauge, fits in there. And then behind that is the coping saw, which doesn't get used nearly as much. But if you're doing things entirely by hand, you've got to have the ability to make curves. And then over here, all the saws are held in place by magnets so that in traveling they don't fall out. And I carry with me my number 7 jointer. My winding sticks separate the 2 sets of planes. I have my half-inch shoulder plane here, my low-angle block, my 5.5, which is missing a frog, different story. Over here is my crosscut saw. This is my rip saw, both panel saws from Lee Nielsen. Here's my steel rule, held in place with magnets. My level sits up here, drops down into a little groove so that it doesn't fall out. Scrub plane it goes in there, drops down into a little recess. My small router plane, which is held in place with magnets. My Lee Nielsen skew block plane, which everybody should have. There's the fence. My combination square, and then over here, I haven't quite finished this one yet. I want to put my egg beater drill up in here. But here's my brace. There are my bits, the most common ones I use. Bits down here, screwdrivers. Here's my drawer bottom plane that we use to cut. Well, it usually comes out. I could say it's in there tight so it doesn't fall out. We use that to cut the groove on the bottom of a drawer to house the drawer bottom. Now down here, this is interesting. This door comes off and is painted with a special paint so it becomes my whiteboard. This door comes off and parts in there to become my saw bench. That's what that is. And then I have a drawer with all my dovetailing stuff, all my screws that you would need. This one is where all my sharpening gear goes. This is heavy. And a typical drawer or drawer construction, since we're talking about that, is not designed to be used out of the drawer opening. So you can see, you want your drawer to be nice and light. This is made out of pine. Why? Well, because in order to travel with it, I need it to be light, but at the same time, I had to make it strong, and I'll explain that momentarily. But if you're taking a drawer like this out and setting it down, sooner or later, you're going to break off, or you risk breaking off the bottom. When you cut your groove to house your drawer bottom, you significantly reduce that thickness. So that lends itself well to being in a drawer, but not to be taken out with heavy gear and set down somewhere. So when we built this drawer, we actually glued the plywood bottom right to the bottom of the drawer so as to avoid that issue. And my friend Ahmed made this drawer for me because for 4 years this thing didn't have a drawer because I hadn't gotten around to finishing it. So he built that drawer for me, so we have yet to kit that one out. In here is my bench hook. I've allowed my students to borrow it, and then they've almost got it cut in half, so I'll have to make a new one. In here is my shooting board that I carry with me. Best friend to a hand plane. And they tuck in there nicely. We use Bloom quick release hinges, which make it really easy, although a little bit cramped in order to get all this stuff back in there. And then, as I mentioned, over here. So let me just show you how this goes back together. Now, something else I wanted to tell you. Oh, so in order to have these side pieces stay attached, the simplest way, you may notice, but they're not quite touching down here. And if you look, these pins that we have them held in place with are on an angle. So gravity keeps that nice and tight, and that way it cannot touch the bottom. Now I just have to move this bottom one in, and I'll leave it in there. So this one fits in here. Now I knew when I built this that traveling around the country with it, the outside was going to get beat up, and maybe I brought it on by suggesting it. But the first time we traveled with it, they hit it with a forklift. But I built the outside case, and by the way, this is the first time that I ever actually hand dovetailed plywood. And I was quite surprised. This is Baltic birch. It turned out extremely well. Wasn't 100% convinced it was going to be strong enough, a lot of racking going on. So I put a dowel, I reinforced with a 1/4-inch dowel like this on each one of the tails and pins. So I think it's good and strong. But I built this with the intent of being able to take all the interior contents out. They're just screwed in place so that when this outside gets destroyed, I can make a new one, fit all this stuff back in, and back to business. Let me take this bottom one out. Lift these two off. Again, all made out of pine, but I purposely kept it thicker because I needed that strength. At least I think I did. And then this section. Oh, and by the way, these outriggers that we have our wheels on, I purposely made it longer so that we could have the last one behind here. That allowed me to put this heavy upper case at the rear, which gives me some shelf space here, and I don't risk instability by having that at the very back. That's why. And these things detach and fit right inside there as well when we travel, because from experience, if you travel with something like that on a pallet, sooner or later they'll end up hitting these wheels with the fork, and there it goes. Now this piece fits right in here. And then we put the door on. This is the part that gets a little bit tricky just because it's tight quarters. Ah, missed it. Get in there. There. Now this one, I'll show you how it goes together because I think it's interesting. It's amazing how secure these wedges are. So the top sits on, there's 4 holes in the door, and there's 4 short 1/4-inch dowels. Just tap the wedges to free this up. These components are made out of plywood. And when I say everything was done by hand, it means we didn't use any power tools at all. Everything was rough lumber, dimensioned by hand. They fit in the back. These fit in between. Getting all this to work was a trick, but we got it. And believe it or not, those wheels and those brackets underneath will actually fit in there as well. Just don't ask me to do it. Now, I just did that wrong because I don't have access to this hinge if I do it like that. So those two tall pieces have to go over against this outside wall, and then these will go in there. Now I let the students use all this stuff when I teach, and they've only managed to cut. They cut it once there, and just nicked it there. Not bad. Now there's a lock, a latch on here. I put that in just to, what I didn't think about was these things moving forward, and no sooner had made this and that latch just from traveling got that part all scratched up. So I drop a piece of plywood in there, and then I have a lock on here. I don't think I ever got to use it, and I lost the key. That's me. All right. Any questions? Fire away and I'll try to answer them. So let's get back to this. Now, I need... Hi? 12? Well, we're going to go a little longer. Yeah, you know what? That's not worth worrying about. That can be down below. Okay, so these two pieces, now what I should do is check them for flat. So hold that up to the light with a straight edge. And I got a bit of a bump in there. So I can't have that. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to take a pass right down the middle. And I'll keep doing that as long as I'm getting a shaving. Now what will eventually happen is the plane will start to get hung up on the outside edges. So if I got a bit of a crown right there in the middle of the board, keep planing and planing and planing until you take the crown down. But now that part of the plane is referencing over here and this part over here, and this no longer allows you to take a shaving. So I'll hold my plane on edge like that, and I'm still a little bit high. Now I'm going to step over to one side. Actually, I'm going to check that again. I'll check it in 3 places. That looks pretty good, except for right here. Let me read that. And I can see why, too. The grain changes just enough to offer a little bit of extra resistance so it doesn't start as smoothly as it should. So I'll put a little more effort right there. Okay, no light. Good. Feel it. No plane tracks. Now, we'll bring this drawer over. Only because I want to see what we did for thickness. And that's quite a bit. I don't want to have to plane off that much. So I'm going to send those through the thickness planer and take them down to being close. But I can't get too close because the thickness planers always end up excuse me, with a bit of snipe, and I got to protect against that. Let's also try the height top to bottom. I just want to see how close I am. Okay, I got a little bit there. So next thing to do is send them through the thickness planer. I'm just going to measure that. I'd like to get these drawer sides to be the same. Oh, I can't see that white. It's so... Shoot, that's not a whole lot. More on that side. So I've got about a 16. I'm a heavy 16th on this side, and I'm closer to a very shy 16th over here. Now the problem is when I run these through a thickness planer, it's going to make that bottom side dirty, and I'll have to end up planing it again. But let's hope we can get this through without wrecking it. This is a general. What is the number on it, Jake? It was made in Drummondville, Quebec. Great piece of equipment. So, yeah. Lost my little mark. Must be on the other piece. So we're finished out at 3/8. It wasn't a bad, it was a good idea. Why do we say wasn't bad instead of that was a good idea? What? That's good. I've never been taught this, and I learned it before I had to learn it the hard way, but whenever you're feeding stock into a plane, you don't ever have your fingers on the bottom. Keep your hands on the top, because as soon as that infeed roller grabs it, it's going to slam it down, and if it's a piece of hardwood and your fingers underneath it, you're going to have thinner fingers. Now, I want that to be just a little bit less, so count for the backlash. I had to search high and low for this holly, so I'm being particularly careful with it. I can't see the grain, but sometimes you can feel it. Now, I don't have to plane these. They'll be done at the end when we clean up the outside. I just have a close look at this and see if I left any marks on it. It's actually not bad. I was surprised.
9.
Yeah. Well, I left enough. I'll be able to get rid of it. Okay. Now our next move is to go in there and get our reference edge, which is the bottom. And I'm going to use a longer shooting board for that. And the purpose of this is merely to keep the board and the plane at right angles, but just in one direction. I'll show you what I mean. Whenever you use a shooting board to square something up, you have to have more surface area along here than you do along here, which means I could appropriately use it to square that end, but I certainly can't use it to square this under that circumstance. But what it does do is it allows me to keep the board and the plane square in this direction, which is important for this particular application. Now, I want to label these now because I want to make sure I keep the grain direction right. Where's my... This is my inside. Okay, so this is going to be, I think this is going to be my top left, but I just want to make sure that I can put that little scar right there. I'd like to put that down on the bottom, below the bottom actually. I think I can plane in that direction. So this is going to be top right, and this is going to be top left. These I always mark the fronts. So we want to straighten this bottom edge, and once we do it, we never touch it again. That becomes our standard. Everything is going to be referenced off of that. So we'll set that on there. Now, when I'm using a shooting board like this, I'm actually using the sole of the plane to straighten this. The shooting board is keeping it square, but I have to use the plane in order to straighten it. So I'm pushing directly across from the blade over the length of the piece. Do that until I feel like I've got a clean pass the whole way. Now I'm going to use my big number 8 just as a reference. Okay, that tells me that this is not flat. There's a pivot point. There's a high point that it's pivoting on. So I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to start right about here, and I'm going to take a pass that takes about 1/3. Then I'm going to step back a little bit, and I'm going to go a little bit further. I'm going to step back further and go further. Come back in, take another section out of the middle, repeat the same process without going full length, and then work at it until I get a full length pass. I haven't yet. And let's see how we did. Okay, that looks pretty close. I can work with that. Now we'll do the same thing on this one. First thing we want to do is get it clean. I'm making contact out here and at the far end. My index finger keeps the board laying flat. My thumb and my middle finger apply the pressure evenly to keep it tight against the sole of the plane. And my thumb tells me it's beautifully smooth. Yeah, I can make that just a little bit better. I'm going to go from here, exit right there before the end, then try a full length pass. Okay, I can work with that. I'm going to go back and check this one more time. I think I could have moved that high point back a little bit. Oh yeah, I should never let that go. Now go full length. Try that. Didn't work. Let's come up here. Not going all the way to the end. Now try a full length. But I have to get a full length pass, and I can tell when it disengages. Yeah, it's back here somewhere. That's all right. Okay. Now, how long are these compared to how long we need them to be? Oh, we got quite a bit we can cut off. So let's find. Now, this is not the shooting board I want to use. That's more or less for doing long pieces. This is my shooting board that I use most of the time. Make sure there's no debris in there. I just want to say I have the opportunity to remove almost 3 inches, so I'm just going to look and see if there's some stuff I'd like to get rid of. So this has just got some grain that's just starting to get a little bit less than perfect. Ideally, on your for your drawer stock, you'd like to have lovely straight grain. Quarter sawn would be best in terms of stability. But I can't be fussy when it comes to trying to find holly. Okay, I'm going to get rid of, there's a really bad snipe right there. So I'm going to get rid of that back side. Right about there. And this one. Well, that's got a really bad snipe there too, so I'll have to live with what I have up there. That allows me to get rid of all that snipe. We may as well do that at the chop saw. Changed my mind. I'm going to use my crosscut saw and my bench hook instead. It's quiet. I love the way it cuts, and I don't have to deal with the tear out on the back side. That there's a fairly open, I call it a throat if it was anything else, over there in the chop saw, and I don't want to run the risk of making a mess. Where's my, thank you. This is what I call it a joinery crosscut saw. It has 15 teeth per inch, just 2/1000 of an inch set per side, and it cuts well enough. This is more than what it's designed to cut, but I like using it anyway. But it will leave you such a nice, clean cut. You can join right from it. I'm going to shoot that, in case you're wondering, but if you had to join right from it, you could. Now I want to cut on the face side, the good side I mean, just in case. Keep any splintering on the back side where it's going to be removed. Meaning the material is going to be removed, or a good chunk of it anyway. So I want to run something by you folks in this time of uncertainty. Can't plan very far out. So we're thinking about doing we should probably talk about this tomorrow after Frick's here, right? We're thinking about doing a virtual dovetail class. That means the camera would be sitting here, Jake would filming, I would teach the class right here, so it would be an 8 to 10 hour class. You'd learn to cut through dovetails. And we'll have it so that it's as interactive as possible. And I'm going to give you more details tomorrow. But if you think it sounds like something that you might be interested in, we'd like to gauge that interest level so we can go ahead and make plans if there's enough people to warrant doing it. You would have to have the appropriate dovetail tools in your possession. as well. That's where that came from, Jake. We were wondering where that extra block was. And you're going to need a bench.
We're at 30.
At 30 minutes? All right. I better call it quits. Let me tell you what we're going to do tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll go through, we'll square up both ends to get it to length. And then we go through the careful process of fitting it to this opening. And it has to be precise. We do not want to lose that perfect fit we're aiming for. We should be able to do that easily within the session. And then we'll get started on laying out the dovetails, both front and back. I've got to fit that. All right. See you folks tomorrow. Have a great night.